Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the breaker session. We start off this morning with mobile security attacks with Yair Amit and Adi Sharabani from SkyCure. Good morning.
Okay, good morning, everyone. I hope you have fun in the conference so far. So what Adi and I are going to do today is do a pretty challenging job. We're going to try to use the next 45 minutes to provide you an overview about emerging and current threats on mobile devices. As a mobile security company, we perform a lot of research, and during the presentation we will also touch a few of SkyCure originated SkyCure research. But before we start, I'd like to give you a quick overview about ourselves. Personally, I've been active in the security research world for about 15 years now. Have more than 15 patents filed in the field of security, and my background actually spent a huge amount of time around web application security, both in Watchfire, in which we provided the AppScan product family, as well as later on, after we were acquired by IBM, managing the worldwide application security group.
So good morning, everyone. I'm Adi Sharabani. I'm the CEO of SkyCure. I've been doing and living security for the past 17 years. In my relevant background, I was a manager at Watchfire, where I built and managed the application security and research group. After the acquisition by IBM, I took different roles. The last one was responsible over the security of IBM software products. And I'm also very proud to be a high school teacher and very active in the cyber security related activities. A fellow at Yuval Ne'eman workshop, which held a conference last week, a very interesting one. And that's it. The agenda for today's session will try to cover all four major threats for mobile devices. There is the physical layer, which is kind of handled by the operating systems and MDM, mobile device management solutions. There is the network layer, which is a huge gap today, especially from the organizational perspective. There are the discussed topic of malware, which is having a lot of changes over the past few years, and would like to somehow give you visibility to some of these changes. And there is the notion of application security and privacy, and everyone here in the audience that lived OWASP for many years saw the huge increase in application level threats on the web servers, and now we see that this increase starts to come to the mobile applications themselves. What we're going to try to do is, on one hand, give you an holistical understanding of the threats, but on the other hand, we want it to be very tactical and to the point. So during the presentation, we're going to cover a lot of examples of each of these cases to try to give you an overall story and better understanding of this, not in a very high level, 20,000 mile kind of discussion.
So what we actually decided to do is, we just discussed before the presentation, and we said that in any presentation you have a very, very boring slide. So we decided to just start with it, so the rest would be better, okay? So the slide is actually talking about the physical layer, and I believe that anybody in this room is very familiar with this kind of problems. 3 years ago, when many people talked about mobile security, they actually talked about physical security. Obviously today the big dangers are outside of this vector, but just about scenarios in which your device is being lost or just stolen. And over the years, the operating systems and some mobile device management solutions have provided some mitigations for these threats, by the way, mainly around device loss, not necessarily around a device being stolen. So I'm talking about the ability to remotely wipe the device and other capabilities.
Yair's note about lost and stolen device and the difference in this, I see still many people that are talking about this as a similar concept. When your device gets stolen, the first thing that the stealer does is to remove the internet connectivity from that device, disallowing all of the, many of the mitigations to happen. Okay, so let's move on to some more interesting things. We have the mobile devices connecting to networks all the time. How many of you, just to know, how many of you have iOS devices? How many of you have Android devices? Yeah, cool. Approximately 70% iOS, 30% Android, something like that. And I assume that you all connect to wireless networks all the time. How many of you connected to the Wi-Fi of the hotel or the conference? So we do that all the time, right? And in many cases, we don't have visibility to the type of threats that happen there. So shortly, I'm going to show some of the threats that we see and how they evolved with time. But before that, let's talk a little bit about statistics. So the first thing we notice is that 10% of all the networks that we connect to contained at one point of time a threat. And by talking about a threat, I'm not talking about, hey, this is a public network so someone can see what I'm doing and etc. I'm talking about an active attempt to change your traffic and to perform something like decrypt your SSL information, to perform SSL stripping attack and etc. This can be originated by the owner of the network, but also from malicious people that connect to the same network as you connect to. And sometimes we see cases where a naive person that only has a virus on their device connect to that network, and through that device, the remote attacker is attacking the local nearby people that connect to this network. From the perspective of the device, the end user, we see that there is 23% likelihood that you will connect to such a network within a period of 1 month. When we take a larger period of time, obviously the likelihood of you to connect to such a network increases with time. And we also see some differences with behaviors of people. So if you tend to travel more, you're more susceptible to such attacks. We just recently published an open project that you can just browse to maps.skyq.com and search for any location that you want and gain information about incidents that happened in that area. This will give you up to 10 incidents per search, and that would allow you to answer questions like, is there any attack taking place near your home, near your office? Are there any specific networks you should be concerned about, get alerts, and etc.?
And that's an interesting notion, because we've been talking for years now about the obvious fact or belief that in areas such as airports, there are more attacks being carried against Wi-Fi users, right? For obvious reasons. We are, in many cases, businessmen that need connectivity. We are very tired. We don't have a good roaming plan, and therefore we connect to Wi-Fi networks. And attackers know that and utilize that. But the exciting point is that using this free tool that contains more than 100,000 incidents, you can actually see for a fact that around airports, such as JFK, you see much more incidents and exposures. And that's, in my perspective, a very interesting visibility about the current status today.
So let's talk about what are the threats that we see. And over here, we divide them into two types of threats. Implementation issues, which are essentially bugs that someone created somewhere, and design issues, which are problems in the design of how things are working. Usually the implementation issues are being fixed as they've been discovered, and the design issues takes much, much longer to fix because it's a change of what we are doing and how we're doing it. So when we talk about implementation issues, we want to, because these are bugs, we want to talk about the developers of this operating system. So over here we see a difference between iOS and Android, right? In iOS, we have a very good update mechanism. So whenever groups like us report an incident to Apple, we don't talk about it. Apple fixes the issue, and as soon as they fix the issue, the update gets pushed to a very good rate of users. You remember the statistics?
Yeah, actually, today it's more than 92% of devices already run iOS 7, the latest version, except let's not think about the fresh iOS 8, but like a few days ago, when you would look at the status, you would see about 93% using iOS 7 and about 6% using iOS 6. That means a very good conversion rate. And that's good in particular when you think about Android, where there is the huge challenge of fragmentation. A lot of users, a lot of market share, but at the end of the day, each device, each user is restricted to a certain level of operating system. And when incidents such as security incidents happen, and even when a patch is released, the time that it takes from the incident until you are actually protected might be very, very, very long. That's a big problem.
So let's look at two types of threats. We'll demonstrate one that was recently revealed in iOS and another one that was revealed in Android.
Yeah, so very, very nice bugs in my perspective. The first one is well-known go-to-fail, was actually uncovered in February this year. And that's an amazing bug, both because of the reasons, the technical aspects of this bug, but also about its ramifications. So first of all, we're talking about a bug that existed for all of us, all of the iOS users, for 17 months without being patched or known to the public. And the ramifications of this go-to-fail bug were actually the ability of an attacker to be at the same area as you are, in the same network as you are, and being able to seamlessly listen and manipulate not only plain text communication, but also SSL communication. So I'm talking about your exchange, about your bank, about your Facebook, about your LinkedIn, whatever. And we actually chose to show you a quick snippet from the actual bug called the go-to-fail. And that's actually a funny bug because its basis for us developers is rather common. It happens to us, but not in this level of critical path. This is called copy and double paste, okay? So let's look at a function in iOS that was responsible for part of the SSL handshake logic. And this function is actually responsible to check part of the stages and validate that they are valid. And at the end of the result, if the function returns 0, everything is okay. Otherwise, it just explains what is the problem in the validation. The second element that is important is this function that actually does the actual verification. And this is where we actually, as developers, want each of the handshake to be validated. But as many of you may know, this is the bug. We have go to fail twice. And what it actually means, jump to the end of the code. And the interesting part is that if this function just returns 0, that means nothing bad happens in this specific stage, the function would return 0, which indicates that the whole logic was executed and the certificate is valid.
You know, we always talk about coding conventions. And
Yeah.
I always like to, when I used to code, I always like to put brackets in even ifs that has only one line. And this is a great example for why it's important. The indentation might cause you to think that both of them are inside the if, but because no brackets exist here, then the second go to fail will always be called, or the first one, yeah, as you said.
Yeah. So another example, Heartbleed. I'm not going to talk about it a lot. I think it was discussed in any conference, in security conference since April this year. In a nutshell, it allows, many of the discussion was around the ability to extract 64 kilobytes of information from web servers, and as we all know, the exposure was just terrible. But the interesting notion is that mobile can also be exposed. And a few researchers has actually showed that for Android 4.1.1, which enabled the vulnerable OpenSSL library, and also the Heartbeat extension, were actually vulnerable to that. Harder exploitation, but still possible. And at the time of the exposure, the uncovering, we had 50 million devices running this version of Android. That's a huge problem.
So we talked about implementation bugs. Let's talk about design issues. And over here, we really like design issues because they stay. You know, they are going to be with us for years from now, and we'll show some examples for that. We can divide them also to two sections. One are designs of the protocols themselves, how HTTP works, how HTTPS works, and etc. And other is design of the operating systems themselves. And we see that mobile devices are much more challenged with these type of issues. First of all, especially when we're talking about trying to protect these devices, we see that all the classical paradigms of security approaches that have been used in the wild for the past 20 years on desktops are not really applicable for the mobile. allowing us to see what you're doing on this specific site.
Just bear in mind, it's 5 years old and still applicable to many devices. So we've seen standards such as HSTS that mitigate the risk of that, but still it's amazing to see 5 years later how so many devices are still susceptible to this kind of problems, including mobile devices.
We will share the slides later, so wherever there are more questions on technical details, in many places we placed read more to external articles that can provide that. For those of you who have iOS, how many of you seen this screen? And what would you say that, not you, but your friends would do on this screen? They would click continue, right? Any suggestions about statistics? How many of the people click continue in your perspective? Shout, because I can't hear.
95.
92%. We did several tests for that. We popped up this message to a lot of users that have just passed by, and we saw that 92% of the users have clicked continue on the screen. Yair also made a great recommendation where we didn't test that, by the way, but he thought of the 8% that didn't click continue. If we would pop up this message for them again, and again and again, they will probably click continue, right? So again, we didn't do this analysis, but we are pretty positive that it will even increase the numbers. The impact of this is very, very simple. This screen actually says to me, hey, you're trying to interact with google.com in an encrypted manner. In many cases, this is launched by your Exchange mail application. And while the mail application wants to work in an encrypted manner, it sees that someone is doing something fishy to the traffic. They're decrypting the traffic and re-encrypting it with their own keys. And it alerts you about it. And the second you click continue, your email password is immediately leaked out to the person that performed the attack. They have now control over your entire Exchange traffic, which means in many organizations access to, it's the domain password, right? So all services created by the organization. And it also allows the attacker to control other services that you don't even use from the mobile devices, even services that doesn't need the same password. When you forget your password for Salesforce, you click, I forgot my password, and it sends you a verification, a reset link to the email. So taking control over your email takes control over your entire digital life. Last example that we have seen is someone that changed the contacts. Exchange is capable of changing some elements on your device. So it can change your contacts and see your meeting information, and etc. So one of the cases we saw is that someone caused Yair's number on your device not to direct to actual Yair's number, but rather to a proxy number that handles all the calls to Yair, allowing them to tap into your calls.
And I think that the human factor is just an amazing problem, right? So, in this case, the operating system behaves okay. It identifies the problem, the invalid certificate, but still people fall for that. When I still remember when we presented in AppSecUSA, I met a very security-oriented colleague of mine, and while we were entering to the venue, I saw him looking at this dialogue and just clicking on continue, because like most of us, he wanted to work and live, and we don't always take the right security decision. And as you have seen in this case, the ramifications are pretty big. Last example, even older, the karma kind of attacks, they keep on coming in various constellations. The notion is that many devices, while they utilize auto-connect capabilities, sometimes for hidden networks and sometimes for any network, they just broadcast the name of the networks they're used to connect to. And there are many tools, including the widely purchasable Pineapple, that implement this kind of attacks. And the attack is very simple. Listen to broadcast names of SSIDs, and then just say, hi, that's me, connect to me. And by doing so, you can actually get a lot of devices to automatically connect to your bad network, and then apply a variety of network-based attacks on these devices.
So we're still in the network-related field, and we're talking about mobile-specific design issues. So for this, we need to better understand the security mechanisms that were invented. So let's discuss iOS as an example. So iOS is considered to be a relatively secure platform. Many people think that if you're using iOS, you're not susceptible to attacks, right? And there are many good reasons for that. You know, Apple has one store, all the applications are going through this store. There is heavy screening process that they are doing on various aspects, as well as malware and things like that. And sandboxing is pretty restricted, so you're not really allowed to do a lot of things through that channel. But we realized is that there are other vectors to access the device. And one of those vectors is configuration profiles. And configuration profiles are essentially XML files that anyone can create. And you can send them to any iOS device through email, SMS, website, an app, and etc. And those will configure elements on your device. Many groups are using them. IT are using them. MDM owners are using them. Sometimes apps are using them for legitimate reasons. And there are several interesting elements when comparing the profiles and the apps. First of all, there is no store. So Apple doesn't do any screening on them. They don't have any visibility to all the profiles that are going on in the wild. And profiles, their effect is over the entire device. It's not bound to a specific app. So as I expressed, we see a lot of relevant, good usages of this, but we also, about 2 years ago almost, we identified that these could be used for malicious purposes. And what we realized is that a malicious person can do a lot of things. One of them would be to install a proxy or VPN that will tunnel all of your traffic from now on to a remote server, as well as install root certificate, causing you to, allowing them to decrypt your encrypted traffic. And we created a good demonstration for that. So this is what we're going to do now. For those of you who want to participate, to get under attack, we will do it slowly. So we will not share anything without your permission on screen, and each time ask for your permission. And you can opt in to be attacked.
Just to clarify, we are going to remove this demonstration from your devices 3 minutes from now.
So for those of you that want to participate, please open your Safari. Close everything you did last night in Safari beforehand, please. And connect to attack.skycure.com. You will see a screen over there of 3 video streaming. All you need to do is download this profile. Sometimes we see complimentary Wi-Fi access. All you need to do is download this app or profile, and etc.
So, technical issues.
So Yair will also attack himself.
And this can try to reshare the network.
Yeah, just 1 second.
No, it should be Thunderbolt. Okay. Yeah.
Just 1 second. Anyone is trying to connect, by the way, during this time? We were frightening you too much, okay. We did this in RSA, the last RSA, and we were amazed by the fact that most of the audience connected, and then we thought that we need to elaborate a bit more on the impact, so now I see that maybe we did it too much. So yeah, can you share your...
No, it does not connect to the network.
Just 1 second.
Let's try it. Yeah. Just a moment.
Okay. So over here, this is the attacker screen, and here you can see Yair's screen. And what Yair will do is he will open his Safari and browse to this malicious website and install this malicious profile.
So I'm a layman. I see that someone promises me free movies, and I have a very secure iOS device. So I say, heck it, let's do it. I recognize this dialog because I installed the mobile device management in the past, or maybe work with mobile carriers that requires that. And I see that this profile is legit. It looks like verified, green. Okay, let's do it. I installed the profile. You see, after about 2 seconds, I'm back in my browser.
Just a second, we can see your screen. Can you try to share again, maybe?
Sure, I'll try.
We have some network issues. Okay. So SEA will try to reconnect his screen to me. I can see every action that he's doing. He's currently on YouTube. This is the free video streaming in practice. But yeah, can you search for some things in Google? As Yair types, all of his keystrokes are get tunneled to the attacker machine. We actually leverage different ways in order to install a key logger here. We can actually control his device. So for example, he search for OWASP. I can, instead of that, send a command to type goodbye OWASP. And I'm taking control over Yair's keyboard and initiating the keystrokes from his device. So what actually happens is that I'm leveraging his credentials on the site, whether it's a secure site or not, it doesn't matter. This allows attackers to leverage situations where the device gain access to some specific privileges. Two-factor authentication, biometrics, all of these kind of things cannot really help against these things. Obviously, I can direct him to any website I want, but it's much more than this, because over here I'm showing you the impact on the browser, which is very crucial because a lot of activity goes on the browser, but it's not enough, right? So the impact is also relates to any other app on the device. May I open?
Maybe LinkedIn?
LinkedIn,
yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to send a command to Yair's device to open the LinkedIn app. And you will see that the LinkedIn app gets opened on this device. He isn't touching his device at all. LinkedIn works in an encrypted manner, so all the traffic gets routed to our servers, but we have the root certificate. So we can decrypt this traffic. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to try to connect to LinkedIn on Yair's behalf. And here I'm here. It's not really fair because this is actually Yair's laptop. We cleared the cache beforehand, but you get the point. If you want to be more excited about this kind of problem here, if you can open your mail.
Yeah, actually, I want to do and try something very fresh. First time we're trying it, so it might not work, but let's do it, okay?
You're surprising me.
Yeah. How many of you use Wells Fargo? Okay.
They're raising their hands slow.
Yeah, I know.
Oh, God.
So, yeah. Okay, so two things just happened, okay? First of all, Adi, you can click on the blue, not the green one. And what we want you to do is actually...
You didn't type your real...
No, it's not my real password. But what you just saw is that I'm using the native, up-to-date version of Wells Fargo, typing my credentials, and yet the attacker, the remote attacker, by the way, it doesn't have to be by me, it can be on the other side of the ocean. It can easily see what I just typed, my credentials to the bank. In addition, in parallel, without me doing anything, my mail app, my native mail app, connected in the background to my exchange successfully. But during that time, the man in the middle, the attacker of the malicious profile attack, was able to actually see my username and full password.
Can I click on the green one?
No.
Okay, so please remove the attack.
Sure.
Just to clarify, this is not a Wells Fargo disclosure.
Yo.
All the apps that you can find, almost all the apps that you can find in the App Store are vulnerable to this, because essentially we're doing a very, very simple thing. Directing all of your traffic to us, and due to the root certificate, we are decrypting all of your encrypted traffic. And this is what we like about these kind of problems of the design.
Please reset. Yeah.
So where do we find these malicious profiles? So first of all, there are these service providers that provide you with some kind of service, free video streaming, but there are also more services that actually provide some sort of service, but during this time they are decrypting all of your traffic. We see cases where we have complementary Wi-Fi access, as I mentioned before. We see cases where there are vulnerable services. So the case where a service got you to install a profile for their own reasons, and due to the vulnerability in it, someone else managed to leverage this trust that you have with the service and tunnel all of the traffic through them instead. And we also see cases where there are privacy violating services. A couple of months ago, LinkedIn had profiles in their app causing all of your traffic, and they actually did it. They decrypted all of your email traffic for various features that are, I really like those features, but they really, really hurt your privacy because they decrypt all of your sensitive data.
So we have 15 minutes left and a lot of content to provide, so we will try to focus on some interesting aspects that we want to share. First of all, I think something very straightforward is the notion that malicious profiles, which just was demonstrated as a very simple flow of an attack, can easily be utilized into becoming a viral process. And the notion is that once I hack and penetrate and impersonate your Facebook, your LinkedIn, your mail, I can easily utilize the same mechanism to utilize the relations of trust between you and your colleagues to make these profiles propagate very effectively.
Okay. Another example is Wi-Fi gate. The problem is, we sometimes hear people that say that I never connect to Wi-Fi, so I'm safe, right? And then we can have the discussion of whether I can guess the Wi-Fi in their home, whether they're susceptible to problems like karma and etc. But if you took an out-of-the-box iPhone and just place your SIM card in it and never connect it to Wi-Fi, are you really safe against Wi-Fi related threats? And this is what we found out, that not. In practice, what happens is that the carriers have the ability to specify Wi-Fi settings on your device. In practice, in many cases, they are even pre-bundled with the iOS device. So because of these settings are the exact settings for all audience, I can look at them. And what we saw is that these settings also contain Wi-Fi credentials. Carriers want to do, sometimes they want to offload their traffic, they want to gain access, to give you access where places they don't have cell tower coverage. And for that reason, they also specify Wi-Fi settings for you. If I create a network in that name, your devices will automatically connect to my router, allowing me to perform all the attacks that we have listed before, without even touching the device.
And now this is this is in many ways the future, up-level vulnerabilities. We've been discussing this for many years around web, and for the exact same reasons, where so many problems have evolved and made us a lot of work and money over the past decade, we expect these kind of problems to happen in mobile applications as well. We have millions of applications already available, and while the operating systems do become safer, mistakes, coding pitfalls of developers, I believe, will keep on happening. We can mitigate them, but we cannot completely eradicate them. What we chose to do today is just choose a few examples of application coding pitfalls. We actually have a lot of other examples, but let's use the time to share a few of them.
Great. So first of all, we still see this. Anyone don't understand what this slide is talking about? If you don't come next year. It's still happening. I don't know why. It's still happening, like for major apps. And it's like, when we approach vendors that create or companies that create apps with these kind of threats, and we notify them, we're feeling even uncomfortable telling them what's the problem here. So I hope that it's okay that I'm not discussing this even. And a more interesting element is certificate pinning. Essentially, SSL was invented with a mechanism of signatures, right? So we have the root certificates, and they sign all the certificates that are being used when we interact with an SSL-enabled website. And by that, we can identify the fact that we are actually talking to that specific service. However, if someone got in a various way, if someone got you to install a certificate on your device, or for some reason, you get this pop-up and you click continue, all of these things, then everything fails. But in the mobile world, we have a better solution for this. In the mobile world, your app can verify that the chain of certificates that you get from the target server is exactly the chain of certificate that you were supposed to get, because you wrote both the app and the service. You know of both of them. And this is very different than the browser case in the classical desktop environment, where the owner of the browser has no control over the websites that you develop, that you connect on, sorry. And for this reason, the whole notion of a root certificate authority was created. Over here, we have something that is much, much better. And this will allow you to remove many of the attacks that we see on SSL on websites, on mobile applications. Another element here is that the users can never know. They always have to trust you. They don't know if you're connecting through HTTP, and they don't know if you're connecting through HTTPS or not doing the certificates. And hence, it's very important for you as developers to take responsibility over this.
Yeah, so for obvious reasons, this is not happening fast enough. And this is by the reason Adi mentioned that Wells Fargo is not specifically vulnerable, and he's correct. Almost all the applications in Apple's App Store do not perform certificate pinning. That is why Facebook is problematic. That is why LinkedIn, that's why Exchange and banks. And there are some awareness issues, but also technical issues. When you perform certificate pinning, you are actually required to make things extra correct. Think about the notion of pinning a specific certificate that you currently have between the client that you wrote and the server that you wrote. What happens if the certificate now needs to be changed, like if it's expired or just compromised? That means that if you haven't thought about this before, you would have a very big problem with your applications because they expect specific certificate and want to change it. So in order to properly implement certificate pinning, you must also have a mechanism that allows you to fall back and exchange the pinned certificate. There are some mitigations by the fact that we do have the ability to send a new version of apps through the app stores, but still this is a very important notion, and I can share that we're aware to pretty big companies that had a nightmare around that. Last example is something I think is pretty nice, very, very simple, very logical problem that still applies to tens of thousands of apps in the App Store. Many fixed it, but still, a year after we uncovered this, we see a lot of vendors still working on fixing that. And the problem is very, very simple. We're talking about apps and the way apps cache HTTP directives. So let's see a quick diagram and illustration of the problem, and then we can discuss about its ramifications. So we have an app, we are users, we connect to a Wi-Fi network in a scenario of a man in the middle, okay? We use the app, but when the app starts sending requests, what the attacker has to do is very, very, very simple. He has to provide a 301 response redirecting to another URL. And 301 means persistent redirection, right? But what actually happens the moment that happens is that the app now asks for the new URL that he received. And that one actually gets to the attacker server, which in change want to make sure that the attack remains seamless. And for that reason, he actually requests the actual content from the real server. So far, what just happened is a very, very simple HTTP response attack with no visual indication to the victim. Why? The same UI is presented, and in mobile apps, unlike web browsers, you can't really see the URL, right? You don't have an idea where your app is communicating to. But the interesting part is, if you think about the code that was written, you have like in the first request, a specific URL for loading the information from your app provider. But now what just happened is that the app logic has persistently changed. From now on, no matter what you do, you can close the app, open it, close the app, open it. It will keep on asking the requests. Instead of the real server, it will ask them from the fake server, from the attacker server. That becomes interesting like 1 month later. You are at your home, feeling secure, reading your news in New York Times or whatever. But, and I'm not saying this is vulnerable, just as an example. And you read the news, but now, instead of reading the real news, you are actually reading fake news. If it's a bank application, you understand the notion. And that's for me, a good example of the problem of application security. When someone identifies a problem in the operating systems, that is terrible. But the moment a patch is available, the exposure goes down pretty fast. In application security, where you have a category of problems, think about cross-site scriptings, think about SQL injection, it just keeps on happening for a long period of time till being properly mitigated.
So we need to speed up. Let's talk for a few minutes about mobile. And when try to look at the future, I always try to look at the past and see what happened in the past and try to deduct according to that. So 2011 was marked to be the year of Android malware. We've seen tons of Android malware on the Google Play, external stores, and etc. And in 2012, Google decided to fight that with features such as Bouncer that started to do scanning, similar to what iOS is doing. And they've been improving that ever since. In 2013, we hardly see any malware on the Google Play. All the reports that you will see are usually trying to confuse you around this. But in practice, 99% of the malware is from external stores. Recently, Google decided to fight that as well. So they've introduced features such as Verify Apps, which purpose is to identify and handle situations where malware apps are getting from external stores. In that sense, Google is becoming more and more like iOS on the front. But the malware problem will not be, fully mitigated, right? We know that it's here to stay. And what we see is that there is kind of an axis between real malware apps that we can think about and apps that hurts your privacy. And they actually provide some kind of service. I'll give you an example. In Google, in Android, when a new app installs itself, it asks for various credentials. And let's assume that it asks for credentials to see all of your keystrokes. It's a keyboard. Now in iOS 8, you can do that as well. Now, if I would tell you that I'm taking all of your keystrokes and sending them to a remote server, would you say I'm a malware? Yes, right? But if I would say that I'm a very sophisticated keyboard that is capable of giving you recommendation based on the things that your friends has typed in the past in their devices, then I'm suddenly a service. And it doesn't matter because you are still at risk. And if I'm talking about organizations which put so much money in protecting their devices of their employees, they are simply unaware of these kind of problems. Let's skip for the sake of time. I want to summarize. We talked about 4 main threats. The first one is the physical layer. The second one is the network-based threats. And the third one is the malware and application security threats. And we see them as becoming a unified problem. We hope you enjoyed the discussion. We hope you enjoyed the demo. If you want to see it on your own devices, we would love to do it for you. And that's it. If there are any questions, we would like to answer them.
Thanks.
Yes.
Yeah. Has Apple addressed anything about signing on the profiles, or is that still going to be state?
The question was, has Apple addressed anything about signing the profiles? So there is a way, a mechanism to sign profiles. This mechanism does not go through Apple. So there are actually 2 mechanisms, but one of them doesn't go through Apple. And even the one that goes through Apple is not really a blocker for attackers because Apple gives you a certificate to sign your profile with your Apple's certificate, but they don't see what's going on with these profiles later on. And we need to remember that there are many legitimate uses of profiles where the owner that created the profile doesn't really want to go through Apple. The simplest example is SSL decryption that is done by the organization. Some organizations are doing that, right?
SSL inspection.
SSL inspection. So they decrypt your traffic. They want to install certificate on your device. This is essentially a semi-profile that they install on the mobile devices. It doesn't have anything to do with Apple.
But just to clarify, any of the discussion and examples that we provided is obviously fully synced with Google and Apple. In some extent, the beauty of these problems as security researchers is the fact that they are very hard to solve. For example, in 7.1, iOS 7.1, we actually found a way to create completely invisible profiles, both for the user and MDMs. But this wasn't an implementation problem. And for that reason, together with Apple, iOS 7.1 patched this vulnerability. But the more logical problem of configuration profile is something that is logically hard to solve.
Any more questions? Yes.
Any chance you're going
Yeah, so this is an attack, and as an attack, it can be used for malicious purposes. The whole reason we created this demonstration is to demonstrate in a very unique and appealing way the problem. By disclosing the code, we are pretty obvious that it will be used by malicious groups, and this is definitely not something that we want to do.
We are focused on providing, like, in creating solutions that protect against attacks, not attacking it in any way.
Yes.
What are your thoughts on using public key pinning versus certificate?
Didn't hear, I'm sorry.
Can you repeat the question?
What are your thoughts on using public key pinning instead of certificate pinning?
So you mean to? So the idea is not to make sure that the entire chain of certificate is the same, but just the top one. So the question was, when we discussed certificate pinning, we discussed the fact that we want to verify that the entire change of certificate, as you expected to get, was the one that you got in your app. And the question was whether it's enough just to sign the top, the root certificate that is used. This is, I believe it's not enough. And the reason is that we sometimes see cases where someone steals the root certificate, the private key of it, and we saw cases of that in the past few years. And then they will be able to perform their attacks. But the value of this is that if you change your certificate, you don't need to update the apps.
So the answer is it's a scale. We're actually going to release a blog post discussing all of the ways to implement this, and that's a scale of security and flexibility. And this is certainly one of the options that we offer. So it's viable, in my perspective, less secure, but much more flexible.
It's going back to the question of security. There is no secure, right? There is levels that you need to decide based on what your organization needs are. I think that we need to wrap up.
Yeah.
So we are here, so you can approach us, and we'd love to answer questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Yair, Adi, thank you. You guys will be available for the rest of the session?
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. And I also want to point out, by the way, that all speakers have a green badge. So if you see a green badge